من الوفاء لدار بها هجرة المصطفى. Well, it's just gone 19 minutes to 9. You are listening to Sabaahul Muslim on Radio Islam International. We acknowledge our listeners out in Durban and Pietermaritzburg listening to us via Radio Al-Ansar as well. Many of you would have seen the documents circulated on social media, penned and authored by former Minister and Deputy Minister Anwar Surti, in which he makes a case as to why Muslims should still support and vote ANC. Many of you would have read the content of the document, but we thought it would be good to have a chat beyond that with the former Minister and Deputy Minister. Anwar, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Radio Islam International.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me at the outset apologize for last week. It was the first in 30 years. I thought I misunderstood. I thought it was PM rather than AM. So please accept my sincere apologies for that.
Not a problem. So we'll get to the document in a bit, right? But I just wanted to try and get an understanding of what was the motivation. Did you feel that, notwithstanding the great goodwill that the ANC had generated amongst especially Muslims and non-Muslims who are very passionate about the Palestinian cause, by taking Israel to the ICJ, by standing up against Western hegemony with great political and economic risk, did you feel that that was not enough to sway those who perhaps historically voted ANC and were somewhat skeptical now because of the issues that we are all familiar with: corruption, inefficiency, lack of service delivery, and the like?
Well, Maulana, you spot on. Really, what had happened is I've been engaged by many people. You know, whenever you go to Moscow in social gatherings, they would ask you, how should we vote given the reality that there has been corruption, that there are inefficiencies, particularly in local government, and although they had previously voted for the African National Congress, how do they vote now? So, you know, it's really an inquiry. What do I feel about it? And then I received a request from a colleague and a comrade to say, please, man, would you be so kind as to pen something for us, but from a Muslim perspective, given the fact that there is so much of confusion, anxiety, uncertainty in relation to this particular aspect. So I did so, and I did so on the basis of my perception and my understanding. You would have noticed that it was not on any ANC formal letterhead. I do understand, or I believe that it came to the ANC and they inserted the article in the ANC Today. But the intention was really to circulate it amongst Muslims so that they could engage with its content and perhaps be influenced from my perspective.
Now, we know that the Muslim vote, and more specifically the Malay and the Indian Muslim vote, has already been moving away from the ANC for a number of elections that have passed, right? So if you look at the Western Cape, in the last 10 years, if not a bit longer, a significant percentage of the Muslim vote there has been going to the DA. If you look at local government elections, the former Indian areas, many of the ward councillors there now are being voted in from other parties like the DA by the Muslim vote. Do you think that this issue taken by the ANC, or the stance rather taken by the ANC on Palestine, can actually reverse that trend? Or in all likelihood, is there a significant fear that that trend would continue where Muslims continue to distance themselves from the ANC?
I'm reasonably confident and certain that indeed it would reverse the trend, because what is happening in Gaza really is something that speaks to the conscience not only of South Africans but to the entire world. It's about social justice, it's about equality, and it's about speaking up when a genocide is unfolding in front of our eyes in real time. And certainly that moral dimension is something that cannot be ignored. Certainly the voices that I've heard from the ulama and academics is very comforting, to say that you cannot possibly be partial towards a party that is partial towards Israel and seems to deny or evade the reality of genocide. That to me is very comforting, from not only from a Muslim perspective, but from a perspective of social justice, given the fact that we had lived the experience of apartheid. We know what it's like. And that reality certainly is something that we had to look at very, very closely. It is what you had once said, Maulana. It's about a serious moral choice between what is right, what is just, or what is correct, and the comforts that you enjoy and benefits. So whilst many of us, as in the Muslim community, particularly amongst the Indian Muslims as well as the Malay Muslims, have evolved, basically have become more comfortable, more affluent, tend to live in the more middle class environments. And the realities of those in the poorer areas are certainly not known. I've spoken to people to ask them, have you ever taken your children to Alexandra, those from the Houghton area? And hardly anybody has taken the children to Alexandra for them to see the other side. So it's Rosebank, it's Santon, it's Houghton, and this is the comfort zone. So the other reality is unknown to them. And I lived in Cape Town, and I know what's it like to live in Woodstock and in Upper Woodstock, for example, and Rondebosch, rather than living in Guguletu. So that disparity there is something that we have to speak to. And I think the reality is that while service delivery has indeed taken place, even in the Western Cape with the DA, to the more affluent areas, much more has to be done in terms of the lesser endowed areas. And that reality escapes a lot of people. And because we are comfortable, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be comfortable. I mean, I'm not punishing anybody for doing so. I also live in a comfort zone, by the way. So I'm like many others. But I think what is critical, Molana, is to accept the reality that this moral choice is a significant moral choice that will determine your disposition for the future. Because if you are going to be silent, if you are going to compromise in terms of a reality that's staring us in the face, what message are you going to pass to the next generation? And I do believe that the Muslims in general certainly are empathetic, very, very empathetic to the people in Palestine. I take comfort in the fact that when you go for Salah, there are regular, frequent prayers for the people in Palestine. So that solidarity is there. But the solidarity must translate into positive action. And that is basically what I tried to convey in my message. So it is about Gaza, but also about the fact, Molana, that not everything is corrupt. I've served for about 14 years in education, about a year in justice. And during that 15 years in the executive, there wasn't a single allegation of corruption. And education has the biggest budget. And there may have been mishaps and missteps, which were corrected, and we turned disaster into triumph. And I just give you two quick examples, Molana. We were asked to intervene in the Eastern Cape because textbooks were not being delivered, food was not being provided in terms of the nutrition scheme, and financial management was poor. We intervened. The result is if you go to the Eastern Cape now, every single school has a kitchen, has utensils, food is being prepared by the local community, there's no tenderpreneurship, and for more than 18 years, we haven't had a single complaint about nutrition. Now, nutrition is critical because 9.6 million children are being fed every single day. So that's one disaster that was turned into triumph. I'll give you another example, Molana. People, especially the more elderly, would remember some 17 or 18 years ago, textbooks by the officials in Mpumalanga were dumped in a lake. Now, these are workbooks, and workbooks are supplied to promote literacy and numeracy. And we were extremely disappointed and irritated by this reality, and so was the leadership of the African National Congress. We took a decision then that we would centralize this particular process. And every single year, for a learner from grade R to grade 9, 56 million books are delivered free of charge, on time, to every school. Now, that has to be efficient because we are able to track every workbook wherever it goes. We're able to deliver on time. And that has been consistent. If you look at the infrastructure, you have to go to the Eastern Cape and look at the state-of-the-art schools. I remember at one stage we were building 2 state-of-the-art schools per week. Now, there is the reality of corruption, but there is also a reality of change and improvement. Think about it, in 1994, less than 20% of African, in fact, Black, African, colored, and Indian children had preschool education. Now it's almost universal. So more than almost 2 billion children are getting free education. So, these are positive things. And I say, as we look at the realities, we must accept that the ANC indeed has to address malfeasance, has to address corruption. And I say that right at the outset. I'm not making any excuses for that. I am not even exonerating myself as a member of the organization from that particular reality. And I think our community must recognize
Yeah.
another important dimension, and that's freedom of religious expression. I mean, Muslims are really, in terms of tolerance and opportunity, given the freedoms that other countries would aspire to. And
I think that,
Alhamdulillah,
yeah,
sorry,
th-
please go ahead.
there'll be very few people who will disagree with what you've said, right? So the Palestinian issue is not just an issue of international relations; it's an issue of standing up against Western hegemony, of moral courage and justice. You are absolutely correct. Not everyone in the ANC is corrupt. And I think you're also correct that the ANC at times is not given proportionate acknowledgement for its achievements in the last 30 years, considering where it had to start, post the apartheid era. That said, though, corruption, whilst not everyone is corrupt, is endemic in the ANC. Lack of service delivery, incompetence, a lot of the chaos around us, with things literally falling apart, can be directly attributed to bad management and leadership on part of the ANC. There's a lot of talk of renewal. The president himself has spoken about this. But I think the Muslim voter is skeptical about whether the ANC can do that. Can they genuinely overcome this malfeasance and corruption that is so deep and so widespread within its ranks? The intent may be there, but is it realistic to assume that it will be achieved? But I think the point you make to kind of counter this in your document is to say, all things considered, in the last 30 years, the Muslim community has benefited more than it has suffered under ANC rule.
Absolutely, Molana. And indeed, I mean, right now, as we speak, there are changes that are taking place. You could look at the South African Revenue Service that was devastated by corrupt activities, is now on its feet and is moving in a positive way. PRASA is making slow but positive strides. So there is a clear intent to address the issues of corruptions and malfeasance. And it's about leadership, and it's about a commitment within the African National Congress itself. Molana, I serve on the National Disciplinary Committee. People like Carl Niaus, who's basically linked to the chaos that ensued in July. Asa Mahashule, where there are charges of corruption against him, have been dealt with internally within the organization. So it's not like we are folding our arms and nothing is happening. Things are indeed happening, and indeed the ANC has a challenge. But I do believe that, if you're going to basically consider the comforts, your personal comforts, which are certainly not unreasonable, notwithstanding the lack of delivery, to a firm political stand for justice and equality, for humanity, then the choice must be a moral choice rather than a choice for your material comforts. So that is the
Now,
appeal that I
yeah.
make. And lastly, just before I take another question, is to say, look, it's important that we are now having the national and the provincial elections out here. And the message of support from the community, the Muslim community, whether they're Malay, African, or Indian, would be, look, we've given you an opportunity now. You have this period of time to address the issues of inefficiencies and service delivery within local government, which is indeed the local weak link within government. And if you don't do so, please do not appeal for support from us and by us. I think that's a wonderful opportunity to say to you, listen, here it is. But to just be bland about, say, everything is corrupt. And I say in the article, not one single, in 30 years, not one single Muslim representative in the ANC has been associated with any act of corruption. But if I take the private sector and look at the Muslim community involved in those corrupt activities, I can point out and name many, many, many. Now, the thing here is, Molana, that those members who were public representatives served in their communities and the broader communities. They had a history of service. They did not serve for their own selfish ends. And I think that has been the difference. And we have made an appeal to the ANC to say, please, as you select your leaders within the African National Congress, whether they're from the Muslim community or elsewhere, please look at the issues of morality and integrity, because they are critical and certainly should be in the forefront.
And we have about 2 minutes before we have to conclude. I want to squeeze in one more question. The ANC does not do itself any favors if you look at the composition of its upper leadership structures these days. You don't see many Muslims, you don't see many non-Africans, Indians and Khaleds, if we want to use those classifications. Perhaps part of the blame could be put at our own door, that not enough of our youth are going into civic engagement and politics, or not enough of our elder politicians groomed, younger successors. But the ANC also seemed to have kind of abandoned the Indian and Malay community along the way. Is that also a factor in terms of why people are somewhat skeptical to give them the vote this time around?
I don't think so. I think there has been apathy on our part. And in the article, I take responsibility to say we were so immersed in our work, so immersed and committed to bringing about change that we forgot about mentoring and training our younger generation. But the reality is that our community do not participate in branch activities. I mean, I've been in the leadership of the ANC, but I wasn't parachuted. I started off in the branch, worked in the region, worked in the province, worked with the broader community. It was not about my intellectual ability. It was not about my professional skills. It was a combination of both your ability as well as your commitment to bring about transformation. So if we are unwilling to participate in the organizational structures, can we then say, look, why are we being excluded? And the reality is that we are, to a large extent, marginalizing ourselves. We're becoming insular. We're not participating in political activities. And this political consciousness, whether it's with the African National Congress or elsewhere, is so critical for the Muslim population to be part of the mainstream of the politics and the political discourse. So, Maulana, I really think it's a combination of factors. But there are. Fasiha is there. Faiq is there, Sayed is there, Ibrahim Patel is there, Naledi Pando is there. There are many others. I mean, the little town I come from, Mohammed Karani is there, Dabelia is there. So if you look at relative to our population, I think we are well represented. In the past, we were overrepresented, as it were. But that's the thing about the ANC. And I put in the article, I said at one stage, Naledi Pandu and I were minister and deputy minister. We were both Muslim. One African, one Indian, but Muslim. Nobody even better than I learned to say, why are Muslims running education? That was higher education and basic education.
Yeah.
Our first Minister of Justice was Dala Umar. I was also a Minister of Justice, but nobody ever raised the issue of racialism. And that is so critical, that the ANC is the only truly non-racial organization, notwithstanding the fact that there may have been a faction that was more nationalistic and tried to exclude the minority groups, that there has been addressed. I'm so sorry about it.
We've run out of time, but Jazakumullah for taking out the time and chatting with us today.
Thank you so much, Maulana, and thank you for the invitation. And once again, my sincere apologies for the misunderstanding last week Friday to you and the listeners.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, Yusuf bhai.
Walaikum salam, Musa bhai.
Yusuf bhai, I was Qurbani no hu karwana. Bakra lawana